Maybe another time.
My name?
Yeah.
Brian Simon. Date of birth, 1/29/1968. Born in Grosse Hill, Michigan.
Okay. Under that one.
This one?
Yeah, just grab them all. Could you tell me who those people are?
Yeah, so this is my sister Pam, my sister Lisa, myself, and my brother Gary.
Okay. Could you take out the pictures of your mom and your dad?
Yep. Yeah, and my mom, Beverly Jean Johnston.
Huh.
And then this is my dad. This one doesn't have a date on the back, but it can't be much later. And he always had a dad chair you weren't allowed to sit in.
Yeah.
And that's George. George
Yes,
Tobias
that's
Simon.
George Tobias. And what was your mom's name?
Beverly Jean Johnston.
Beverly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in that house?
You know, I was thinking about that because I knew you were going to ask me that. And when you're growing up in it, you don't really it's just what you know. So it was fine. But then when I started meeting other people, then I realized sort of what... I still didn't know what normal was, but sort of like that maybe my life wasn't completely normal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my mom was really mentally ill. And so she never went out, ever. My mom was always home. And like I said, they never had friends over. And my dad was a workaholic. So he was gone mostly, but then when he came home, he was like the long arm of the law. So if you had like upset my mom, or if while he was there you upset him, he was the one who dispensed justice. So there was like pity kind of towards my mom, especially as I got older. When I was a kid, I didn't really realize, but so it was like pity for my mom and fear for my dad. But then my dad was also the one who was pretty supportive. So it was just a very strange relationship. My dad, just to give sort of the big picture, always said that it's how he was raised. So he always thought it was okay if we were raised that way. But yeah, my dad was, sometimes I think about him and think like something wasn't right with that guy. He would like make a paddle to use. I remember there was one like plywood paddle he made, cut it out so it was sort of like a nice long paddle with a handle, and then like taped the handle with electrical tape so it wouldn't like slip out of his hand. And he would use that to, I don't know, teach us if we did something that upset him or upset my mom. He would also use his belt to give us what for if he didn't think we had done the right thing. He wasn't like, and this is sort of a weird thing to say, but like I had a friend, Rob Rose, who lived down the street, whose dad would like punch them in the stomach and stuff, and like kind of beat him up. And my dad never did that. I don't know if that makes any difference or not, but my brother Gary really took a lot of abuse from him. And he really grew up kind of like an abused dog. And I don't know if he would like me saying that, but like he just, when he got positive attention, it was almost like he didn't know what to do with himself. Tried the military. It didn't work out for him. And we weren't really sure why he was honorably discharged, but there was like a story, we don't really know why he was discharged. And then he came home, he found someone, got married to her, and they had a very unhappy marriage. They had a daughter, and then got divorced. Now he's living in Ohio, and he's like on just disability, I want to say, or at least he's trying to get disability, but just struggling. And then my mom was more of like an emotional abuser, and she would just guilt people. So it wasn't the best environment to grow up in. My mom had shock therapy before I was born to try to get her out of her depression. And I don't know if it made any difference or not. She didn't like it. That's the most I got out of. Like, she said that, oh, they did it, and she really hated it. And then she went on medication. So she was kind of like that 50s housewife on medication. And she was on Xanax for like years and years and years. I do remember, and I actually don't know if I told you this, but she did try to kill herself when I was very young. I remember laying in bed and hearing my dad. I think he'd come home from work, 'cause sometimes he would come home from work at like 2:30 or 3 in the morning. And he was talking to her, and she was saying, like, can't they do anything? And he kept us cool, and he said, like, not if you don't want him to. And she said, actually, I don't know what she said, but I know she must have said something like, yeah, I want them to. And because then they went to the hospital, and she got her stomach pumped. But they never talked to me about it. So there was, that, and then she just had hobbies. Other than that, she collected dolls. She made dolls. But she was never happy. She was a very miserable person. She used to always say she wished she were dead. Like growing up, that wasn't an uncommon thing to hear her say. And she was never very happy. So I wasn't glad she had passed away. But there was also a part that thought, like, well, at least she's finally, like, free of all this pain and unhappiness. But it was, it was hard. There was no ceremony or anything. Same with my dad. There was no, like, funeral or anything like that. They had no friends. There was no one to mourn them other than their family.
When did your dad pass away?
It was the late 90s. I just can't remember the exact year right now. 95, maybe? And I had seen him, actually. I went to visit because he wasn't doing well. And I left, and he died that morning. That was sad. He thought he would just die immediately. Like, growing up, he took terrible care of himself, but he would take vitamin supplements and stuff and say, because when I die, I'm just going to die. But he had a stroke, and then, so that was hard to see him in that state, too, especially after someone who was so, like, mean. Like, he could be nice, but he liked being mean. And to see him so vulnerable and frail was odd, a little unsettling. It's hard, like, because my coping mechanism is just to stay away from my family, which feels like copping out, but, someone who happens to be a therapist, who's a friend as well, said, you don't get to choose your family. Sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do.
Is there a reason that Lisa and Gary decided to not talk to you?
Gary went Trump.
Here we go.
Yeah. And so he and I are on opposite sides. With Lisa, my mom this was actually a while, like years ago, but my mom had been telling me that when Lisa and her husband were helping her, they had all lived in a suburb of Cleveland, and my mom was complaining to me that they'd grocery shop for her, but then they'd use her credit card to buy all kinds of things, like their own, like, $300 grocery order or whatever. So I said something to Lisa and her husband, and they got mad, and then they shut me out.
With all this stuff about the way you grew up, was there any extra kind of, like, anxiety about starting your own family?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, but I would say no. I don't even have to think about it. Like, I always knew I wanted to. And, I had a lot of confidence in your mom that she would know what to do, too. Yeah. I think that, it's not a funny joke, but I sort of joke to myself that my family gave me that example of what not to do. I think this was one of the first days we brought Maya home. I remember leaving the hospital thinking someone was going to stop us and say, "You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Bring that living thing back inside." But everything went great.
you face a lot of, like weird, like difficult times when you were growing up. But do you feel fortunate to have moved past that and to have had a family? Seems to be very happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I think that the things that made me feel a little bit ashamed about the way I deal with my siblings now, I think, are survival skills I learned when I was young. Yeah, I hope when I'm, ready to move on, that, like, you and I will be able to say, hey, Dad, you did a good job. Thanks, man. So, yeah, I feel very good about the way things are. Yeah, thanks. It's nice sharing some of that with you.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you already knew or didn't know.
I don't know. I remember bits and bobs, but you are a really good dad. So.
No, thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
You're a really good son.
Thanks. I don't want you to